Have you ever stopped to think about who really saved the wizarding world after Voldemort's fall? While Harry Potter received all the glory, one man worked tirelessly behind the scenes, infiltrated in the heart of the corrupt government, risking his life every second to protect those who didn't even know of his existence. Kingsley Shacklebolt isn't just another Auror in history. He is the silent warrior who kept hope alive when everything seemed lost, the brilliant strategist who deceived the Death Eaters for years, and the leader who rebuilt a society destroyed by tyranny. Today, you're going to discover the true story of the man who became the most respected Minister of Magic in modern history, and why his journey is one of the most fascinating and underrated in the entire magical universe. But before we dive into this incredible story, I need your support. If you're a fan of the Harry Potter universe and want more in-depth content like this, click the subscribe button right now and turn on notifications so you don't miss any video. And tell me here in the comments, from which city are you watching? Now yes, let's get to Kingsley Shacklebolt's story. Kingsley's story begins in a period we know very little about, but which shaped the wizard he would become. Born probably in the late 1950s or early 60s, Kingsley grew up in a time of relative peace in the wizarding world after Grindelwald's defeat. He attended Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry, where he was sorted into one of the houses, although records don't specify which. What we know is that from a young age, Kingsley demonstrated exceptional magical abilities and an unwavering sense of justice that would lead him to choose one of the most dangerous careers in the magical world: becoming an Auror. The Auror career isn't for just anyone. It requires 3 years of rigorous training after Hogwarts, extraordinary grades in the NEWTs, especially in defense against the dark arts, transfiguration, charms, potions, and herbology. Candidates need to pass extremely rigorous character tests and demonstrate aptitude for working under pressure. Kingsley not only went through all of this, but stood out in such a way that he became one of the most respected Aurors in the Ministry of Magic. His reputation was impeccable. His loyalty to the ministry had never been questioned, and his skills in combat and investigation were legendary among his colleagues. For years, Kingsley worked in the Department of Magical Law Enforcement, dealing with dark wizards, dangerous creatures, and threats to the security of the magical world. He was known for his deep, calm voice, which conveyed natural authority, and for his imposing appearance. Tall, broad-shouldered, with a gold earring and a shaved head, Kingsley had a presence that commanded instant respect. But more than his physical appearance, it was his sharp intelligence and balanced judgment that made him truly exceptional. In a world where many wizards acted on impulse or prejudice, Kingsley always kept a cool head and analyzed situations with crystal clarity. When Lord Voldemort returned in June 1994 during the Triwizard Tournament, the wizarding world went into denial. The Ministry of Magic, led by Cornelius Fudge, flatly refused to believe that the most dangerous dark wizard of all time had returned. Fudge was more concerned with maintaining his position and his reputation than with protecting the wizarding population. He initiated a smear campaign against Albus Dumbledore and Harry Potter, the only ones who dared to speak the truth. It was at this crucial moment that Kingsley Shacklebolt had to make a decision that would define the rest of his life: continue serving a corrupt and denialist government, or do what was right, even if it meant treason in the eyes of his superiors. Kingsley chose the truth. He believed Dumbledore and Harry Potter. More than that, he immediately understood the gravity of the situation and the need for an organized resistance. When Dumbledore reactivated the Order of the Phoenix, the secret organization originally created to fight Voldemort during the First Wizarding War, Kingsley was one of the first to join, but his participation in the Order would be different from most other members. While many operated openly against the Ministry or went into hiding, Kingsley would remain exactly where he was, in the heart of the Department of Magical Law Enforcement. as a double agent. Kingsley's position was extremely dangerous. He needed to maintain his facade as an Auror loyal to the Ministry, while secretly working to subvert Fudge's orders and protect those the Ministry persecuted. A single mistake, a single suspicion, and Kingsley would not only lose his career, but would probably be sent to Azkaban or worse. However, he executed this role with absolute mastery. Throughout the year of 1995, while Fudge intensified his campaign against Dumbledore, Kingsley provided vital information to the Order of the Phoenix about the Ministry's movements. Kingsley's first major mission as a double agent came in the summer of 1995, when the Ministry ordered Aurors to pursue Sirius Black. Sirius, Harry Potter's godfather, had escaped from Azkaban in 1993, unjustly accused of murder and treason. Although Harry and Dumbledore knew of Sirius's innocence, the Ministry still considered him extremely dangerous. Fudge was obsessed with recapturing Sirius, seeing this as an opportunity to improve his public image. Kingsley was assigned to lead the hunt for Sirius Black, and it was here that his strategic genius began to shine. Instead of actually looking for Sirius, Kingsley conducted the investigation in such a way as to never find him. He sent regular reports to the Ministry about supposed sightings in remote locations, always keeping the search as far away as possible from where Sirius really was. When the Ministry suggested certain lines of investigation, Kingsley followed them superficially, then reported that they had led to dead ends. He even spread false rumors about Sirius having been seen in places like India, diverting the attention of other Aurors. For months, Kingsley maintained this perfect farce, protecting Sirius while convincing the Ministry that he was doing everything in his power to capture him. But the protection of Sirius was only a small part of Kingsley's work. Throughout the school year of 1995 at Hogwarts, the situation deteriorated drastically. Fudge sent Dolores Umbridge to the school as defense against the dark arts teacher, but her true role was to spy on Dumbledore and take control of Hogwarts. Umbridge implemented increasingly draconian educational decrees, tortured students with her blood quill, and eventually became High Inquisitor and then headmistress of Hogwarts. Meanwhile, Kingsley worked at the Ministry, observing the rise of authoritarianism and paranoia. Knowing that each of Umbridge's decrees, each new oppressive law, was a step toward tyranny. During this period, Kingsley participated in Order of the Phoenix meetings at number 12, Grimmauld Place, the ancestral home of the Black family that served as the Order's headquarters. There he shared crucial intelligence about the Ministry's activities, helped plan operations, and offered his unique perspective as someone who saw the government from the inside. His calm and wisdom were often a necessary counterpoint to the more heated discussions among other Order members. Kingsley understood politics in a way that many others didn't, and knew that simply opposing the Ministry wouldn't be enough. It was necessary to play their game while secretly working against them. In June 1995, everything reached a climax. Harry Potter had a vision of Voldemort torturing Sirius Black in the Department of Mysteries at the Ministry. Desperate to save his godfather, Harry went there with several of his friends, falling into an elaborate trap. Death Eaters ambushed them, resulting in the Battle of the Department of Mysteries. Order of the Phoenix members, including Kingsley, rushed to help. It was the first time Kingsley had fought openly against Death Eaters since Voldemort's return, and he demonstrated why he was considered one of the best Aurors of his generation. During the fierce battle in the Hall of Prophecy, and later in the Ministry Atrium, Kingsley fought with deadly precision. He dueled against multiple Death Eaters simultaneously, protecting the students while keeping the attackers at bay. His magic was powerful and controlled, each spell calculated for maximum effectiveness. When Voldemort finally appeared personally at the Ministry and dueled with Dumbledore, Kingsley was among those who witnessed the legendary duel. But the most important thing was what happened afterwards. Cornelius Fudge, along with several other ministry officials, arrived at the atrium and saw Voldemort with his own eyes before the Dark Lord disappeared. The truth could no longer be denied. Fudge's fall was swift. Forced to admit that Dumbledore and Harry had been right all along, he resigned in disgrace. Rufus Scrimgeour, a veteran Auror and head of the Department of Magical Law Enforcement, took over as the new Minister of Magic. Scrimgeour was a tough man, a warrior who at least recognized Voldemort's threat and was prepared to fight. However, his methods were often questionable, and he was more concerned with appearing strong than actually protecting people. For Kingsley, who no longer needed to hide his loyalty to the Order of the Phoenix from the old regime, the situation became even more complicated under Scrimgeour. During the year of 1996, the Second Wizarding War intensified dramatically. Voldemort and his Death Eaters began to act more openly. There were murders, disappearances, attacks on Muggles and Muggleborns. The wizarding world lived in constant fear. Scrimgeour implemented harsh security measures, but Kingsley saw the problems with the Ministry's approach. Many of the actions were theatrical, designed to give an appearance of control more than actually fighting Voldemort effectively. Worse still, Scrimgeour was willing to sacrifice civil liberties and use dubious tactics in the name of security, something that deeply troubled Kingsley. One of the most significant moments for Kingsley during this period was when Scrimgeour tried to use Harry Potter as propaganda. The minister wanted Harry to appear publicly supporting the ministry, turning him into a symbol of hope that could be controlled by the government. Harry flatly refused, especially after discovering that the ministry had arrested Stan Shunpike, the conductor of the night bus, under false charges of being a Death Eater, just to appear to be making progress. Kingsley witnessed these manipulations and became increasingly disillusioned with the ministry for which he worked. In July 1997, one of the most important events of the war occurred: the transfer of Harry Potter from the Dursleys' house to a safe location. Harry would turn 17, the age of majority in the wizarding world, and the magical protection his mother had placed over him by sacrificing herself, which kept him safe as long as he could call the Dursleys' house home, would expire. Voldemort knew this and planned to ambush Harry during the transfer. The Order of the Phoenix devised a complex plan. 7 Order members would take Polyjuice Potion to transform into identical copies of Harry, and then each false Harry would fly in a different direction with a protector, confusing the Death Eaters about which was the real one. Kingsley was one of the 7 protectors chosen for this suicide mission. He would fly with Hermione Granger, disguised as Harry. The operation, known as the Battle of the 7 Potters, was one of the bloodiest of the war. Death Eaters ambushed all the groups simultaneously, something that indicated there was a traitor in the Order providing information to Voldemort. During the chaotic and desperate flight, Kingsley again demonstrated his exceptional abilities. He protected Hermione while casting spells against multiple pursuing Death Eaters, keeping them away while flying at high speed through the night. The Battle of the 7 Potters had devastating consequences. Alastor Moody, the legendary Auror and founding member of the Order of the Phoenix, was killed by Voldemort personally. Hedwig, Harry's owl, also died. George Weasley lost an ear due to a curse from Snape. Mundungus Fletcher, another Order member, disapparated in panic, abandoning Moody. Moody's death was particularly difficult for Kingsley, who had worked with him for many years and respected him immensely. But there was no time for proper mourning. The war was accelerating, and each day brought new threats. Shortly after the battle, Kingsley participated in the wedding of Bill Weasley and Fleur Delacour, held at the Burrow, the Weasley family home. The wedding was a brief moment of joy in dark times, an attempt to maintain some normalcy and celebrate love despite the chaos around them. Kingsley was among the guests, disguised as a common wizard using polyjuice potion to avoid drawing attention from Voldemort's spies. During the reception, for a few hours, people could forget the war and simply celebrate. But this illusion of peace wouldn't last. In the middle of the celebration, Kingsley's Patronus, a giant silver hare, burst through the tent where the party was taking place. With Kingsley's deep voice echoing from the Patronus, he announced, "The Ministry has fallen. Scrimgeour is dead. They are coming." These simple words triggered panic. Death Eaters began appearing immediately, attacking the wedding guests. In the confusion that followed, Harry, Ron, and Hermione disapparated, beginning their mission to find and destroy Voldemort's Horcruxes. Others fled as they could. The Second Wizarding War had entered its darkest phase. The fall of the Ministry meant that Voldemort now effectively controlled the entire wizarding government of Great Britain. He didn't assume publicly as leader, preferring to operate through puppets like Pius Thicknesser, who had been placed under the Imperious Curse and installed as Minister of Magic. Voldemort's regime implemented increasingly oppressive laws against Muggleborns, forcing them to register with a Muggleborn Registration Commission, where they would be interrogated about how they stole their magic from real wizards. It was a systematic persecution that recalled the worst horrors of Muggle history. For Kingsley, the situation was desperate. He could no longer work at the Ministry without serving Voldemort directly. Any Auror who demonstrated loyalty to the old values or sympathy for Muggleborns was removed, killed, or placed under the Imperious Curse. Kingsley was forced to go underground, officially becoming a fugitive. But he didn't hide passively. Instead, he became one of the central figures of the resistance against Voldemort's regime, working with what remained of the Order of the Phoenix and helping to coordinate protection efforts for persecuted wizards. During the dark months that followed, from August 1997 until May 1998, Kingsley operated primarily through a secret communication network created by Order members. They used corporeal patronuses to send messages, a method that Voldemort and his followers couldn't intercept or falsify, since patronuses cannot be conjured by people with truly evil intentions. Kingsley's silver hair became a symbol of hope for those in the resistance, always bringing warnings of danger or instructions for rescue operations. One of Kingsley's main activities during this period was helping Muggle-born wizards escape from Great Britain. With the Ministry systematically hunting Muggleborns, many needed to flee the country to survive. Kingsley organized escape routes, false documents, and safe shelters abroad. He worked in coordination with international organizations and sympathizers in other countries, creating a kind of underground railroad for wizarding refugees. Each person he helped escape was a small victory against Voldemort's tyranny, a life saved from persecution or death. Kingsley also remained in contact with Order of the Phoenix members who were still active, including Remus Lupin, Nymphadora Tonks, Arthur and Molly Weasley, and others. Together, they coordinated guerrilla attacks against regime targets, prisoner rescue operations, and the dissemination of true information through Potterwatch, a pirate radio station that broadcast real news in a world dominated by Voldemort's propaganda. Kingsley participated regularly in the program under the codename Royal, where he provided updates on the situation and offered words of encouragement to those who listened in secret. On Potterwatch, Kingsley's calm, deep voice became a beacon of hope. While the wizarding world lived under constant fear, with people disappearing daily, families being destroyed, and the Ministry's official propaganda claiming that everything was under control and that those who disappeared were criminals deserving their fate, Potterwatch told the truth. Kingsley spoke about the continuing resistance, about small but significant victories, and most importantly, he reminded people that not all was lost. His message was consistent: keep fighting, protect one another, and don't lose hope. Meanwhile, at Hogwarts, the situation was equally terrible. Severus Snape had become headmaster of the school, with Death Eaters Alecto and Amicus Carrow as teachers, implementing a brutal regime of punishment and dark propaganda. Students were tortured for disobedience, and Muggle studies was transformed into a class about the supposed inferiority of Muggles. Neville Longbottom, Luna Lovegood, and Ginny Weasley led a secret student resistance, trying to protect other students and sabotage the Carrows' regime whenever possible. Although Kingsley wasn't directly involved in Hogwarts' resistance, his actions in the broader wizarding society inspired those brave young people. In May 1998, everything culminated in the Battle of Hogwarts. Harry Potter had returned to the school looking for Voldemort's last Horcrux, and his presence was discovered. Voldemort gave an ultimatum: hand over Harry Potter, or he would attack Hogwarts. The school prepared for war. Professors erected powerful magical defenses around the castle, underage students were evacuated through secret passages, and all who remained prepared to fight. The Order of the Phoenix was summoned, and Kingsley Shacklebolt answered the call without hesitation. When Kingsley arrived at Hogwarts, he immediately assumed a leadership role in organizing the defense. His experience as an Auror and his natural leadership ability made him perfect to coordinate efforts. He worked with Minerva McGonagall, now back as effective headmistress of Hogwarts, and with other Order members to establish defensive positions, distribute fighters throughout the castle's most vulnerable areas, and create contingency strategies. Kingsley knew they would be greatly outnumbered. Voldemort was bringing hundreds of Death Eaters, plus giants, acromantulas, and other dark creatures, but he also knew they had to resist. The Battle of Hogwarts was the bloodiest fight of the Second Wizarding War. It began with Voldemort and his army attacking the castle's magical defenses. When the barriers finally fell, hordes of Death Eaters invaded Hogwarts grounds. What followed was absolute chaos, with duels happening throughout the castle and grounds. Kingsley was at the center of the battle, fighting with ferocity and superhuman skill. He dueled simultaneously against multiple Death Eaters, his spells flying with deadly precision, while he protected students and teachers around him. In one of the battle's most impressive moments, Kingsley fought alone against several Death Eaters in the Great Hall, holding a critical position that prevented the invaders from flanking the defenders. His magic was spectacular, powerful spells exploding from his wand in rapid succession. He used a combination of offensive and defensive magic with absolute mastery, conjuring shields to protect allies while simultaneously attacking enemies, all without even seeming fatigued. Aurors are trained to fight against multiple opponents and in situations of extreme stress, but Kingsley was beyond that. He was an absolute master of magical combat. However, the battle was not without terrible losses. Fred Weasley was killed by an explosion during the fight. Remus Lupin and Nymphadora Tonks, both Order of the Phoenix members and close friends of Kingsley, fell fighting against Death Eaters. Colin Creevey, a young and enthusiastic student, died defending the castle. Many others, whose names may never all be known, gave their lives that night. For Kingsley, who had fought alongside many of them for years, each loss was a stab to the heart. But he couldn't stop. The battle continued, and people were counting on him. When Voldemort falsely announced that Harry Potter was dead and demanded Hogwarts' surrender, despair took hold of the defenders. But Kingsley didn't surrender. Even believing that Harry had been killed and that perhaps all was lost, he continued fighting. When Voldemort and his followers marched to the castle displaying what they believed to be Harry's body, Kingsley was among those prepared to fight to the last breath. And when Harry revealed he was alive and the final battle erupted, Kingsley was there, fighting with renewed determination. The climactic moment came in the Great Hall. While Harry and Voldemort faced each other in their final duel, 3 of the battle's greatest simultaneous duels were happening around them. Minerva McGonagall, Horace Slughorn and Kingsley Shacklebolt fought together against Voldemort as he tried to fight against all of them at once before concentrating completely on Harry. It was a testament to Kingsley's skill that he was among the three chosen to face the most powerful and dangerous wizard of all time, even if briefly. Very few wizards in the world could even survive seconds against Voldemort in direct combat, but Kingsley not only survived, but pressed him. When Harry finally defeated Voldemort, destroying him definitively with the reflected spell, the war was over. Kingsley was there to witness the moment. The relief, joy and pain of victory were overwhelming. They had won, but the cost had been immense. Hogwarts Castle was damaged. Dozens of bodies of fallen allies were scattered about, and the entire Wizarding Society was in tatters after years of war and months under totalitarian regime. The challenge now would be to rebuild, and it would be here that Kingsley Shacklebolt would truly shine. In the hours and days immediately after the Battle of Hogwarts, it was necessary to establish order quickly. The Ministry of Magic was in total chaos. Piers Thicknessy, who had been minister under the Imperious Curse, was obviously disqualified from continuing. Many other high-ranking ministry officials were Death Eaters or collaborators who would now face trial. The government was essentially without leadership at a time when leadership was needed more than ever. There were Death Eater prisoners to process, refugees to repatriate, destroyed families to reunite, and a traumatized population needing direction and hope. It was in this power vacuum that Kingsley Shacklebolt was appointed temporary Minister of Magic. The choice was obvious to everyone involved. Kingsley had impeccable credentials, a highly decorated aura, a resistance hero who had risked his life countless times to protect others, someone who had fought against Voldemort from the first day of his return, and perhaps most importantly, someone all sides trusted. Harry Potter endorsed him, as did the survivors of the Order of the Phoenix, Hogwarts professors, and even many ministry officials who had been forced to collaborate but now wanted redemption. As temporary minister, Kingsley immediately began the reconstruction process. One of his first actions was to dissolve the Muggle-born Registration Commission and declare all anti-Muggle-born laws from Voldemort's regime null and void. He freed all prisoners who had been incarcerated for being Muggle-born or for resisting the regime. He began the process of identifying and arresting true Death Eaters, distinguishing them from those who had been coerced or placed under the Imperious Curse. This was delicate work that required nuance and wisdom, qualities Kingsley possessed in abundance. Kingsley also faced the difficult task of restoring public trust in the Ministry of Magic. After years of corruption under Fudge, ineffective authoritarianism under Scrimgeour, and tyranny under Voldemort's regime, common wizards had little reason to trust their government. Kingsley understood that actions would speak louder than words. He implemented transparency policies, established channels for citizens to present complaints and suggestions, and most importantly, he appointed competent and ethical people to key positions, regardless of their Hogwarts houses, blood status, or political connections. Only their qualifications and character mattered. One of Kingsley's most significant reforms was the complete restructuring of the Department of Magical Law Enforcement, and especially the Auror Division. Many Aurors had been corrupted during Voldemort's regime, and those who resisted were eliminated. Kingsley needed to rebuild the Auror force practically from scratch. He established new training protocols emphasizing not only magical skill, but also ethics, judgment, and respect for citizens' rights. He also relaxed some of the absurdly high requirements to become an Auror, recognizing that resistance heroes like Neville Longbottom, who didn't have the perfect grades traditionally required but had demonstrated extraordinary courage and skill, deserved the opportunity. Indeed, Kingsley personally recruited several members of Dumbledore's army, the group of students who had resisted the regime at Hogwarts, to become Aurors. He saw in them the kind of courage, integrity, and practical skill he wanted in his new generation of law enforcement. Harry Potter was offered a position, and although initially hesitant, he eventually joined the Auror department, where he would excel under Kingsley's guidance and leadership. The relationship between Kingsley and Harry developed from commander and soldier during the war to mentor and apprentice in the new world they were building. But Kingsley didn't limit himself to reforming just law enforcement. He understood that deep structural changes were necessary throughout wizarding society to prevent something like Voldemort's regime from happening again. He began working on legislation to protect Muggle-born rights more robustly, to give more rights to magical creatures like house elves who had been treated as slaves, and to establish constitutional safeguards against the kind of authoritarianism he had seen flourish under Fudge and later Voldemort. One of the most admirable aspects of Kingsley's leadership was his approach to justice and reconciliation. He could easily have yielded to calls for revenge against all those associated with Death Eaters. There was significant public pressure for harsh and broad punishments. But Kingsley insisted on a fair judicial process. He established special tribunals to judge war crimes, but these tribunals operated under principles of justice, not revenge. Those who had committed atrocities were punished appropriately, including life imprisonment in Azkaban for the worst offenders. But those who had been coerced, who had acted under the Imperious Curse, or who had been minor accomplices, received lighter sentences or even pardons if they cooperated. This approach wasn't universally popular. Some accused Kingsley of being too lenient, of letting criminals escape, but Kingsley stood firm. He had seen the damage that cycles of revenge could cause. He had studied the history of the First Wizarding War and its aftermath. He knew that if they simply punished everyone associated with Voldemort indiscriminately, they would create a new generation of resentments that could sow the seeds of future conflict. Instead, he sought a balance between justice and reconciliation, between accountability and healing. Kingsley also had to deal with the question of Severus Snape. After the battle, it was revealed through Snape's memories that he had been a double agent for Dumbledore for years, that he had killed Dumbledore under Dumbledore's own orders as part of a larger plan, and that he had protected students at Hogwarts as much as possible while maintaining his cover. Harry Potter vehemently defended Snape's legacy, insisting that he was one of the bravest wizards he had ever known. Kingsley, after reviewing all the evidence and consulting with those who knew the truth, agreed. He ensured that Snape was officially exonerated of all charges and posthumously recognized as a war hero. During his term as temporary minister, which lasted several months, Kingsley worked tirelessly. He was often at the ministry before dawn and left long after nightfall. He met with representatives of wizarding communities, listened to complaints, resolved disputes, and made hundreds of decisions every day. His energy seemed inexhaustible, his patience infinite. When people came to him with anger or fear, he listened to them with genuine empathy. When he faced political opposition, he engaged with respect, seeking consensus when possible, but never compromising his fundamental principles. Eventually, the time came for formal ministerial elections. Under normal circumstances, there would be multiple candidates, campaigns, debates, but these weren't normal circumstances. Kingsley's popularity and respect were so universal, his leadership during the transition so effective, that there was practically no serious opposition. He was elected permanent Minister of Magic by an overwhelming margin. It was a confirmation not only of his abilities, but of the trust the wizarding people placed in him to continue leading them through reconstruction. As permanent minister, Kingsley continued and expanded his reforms. He modernized the ministry, eliminating useless departments created only to give jobs to political favorites, and creating new divisions focused on real needs like support for war trauma victims and Muggle-wizard integration. He established educational programs to combat prejudice against Muggle-borns and magical creatures. He began dialogues with werewolf communities, vampires, and even giants, groups that had been marginalized for centuries and that Voldemort had exploited for his army precisely because of this marginalization. Kingsley also worked to improve international relations. Wizarding Britain had been viewed with suspicion and fear by other countries during and after Voldemort's regime. Kingsley traveled extensively, meeting with magical leaders from other countries, rebuilding diplomatic bridges, and assuring them that Britain was back to being a responsible nation and reliable partner in the global wizarding community. He was particularly active in international initiatives against the use of the dark arts and in cooperative efforts to capture fugitive Death Eaters who had escaped to other countries. Within Hogwarts, Kingsley worked closely with Minerva McGonagall on rebuilding the school, both physically and institutionally. The castle had suffered significant damage during the battle, and beyond the physical reconstruction, there was the need to heal the psychological traumas of an entire generation of students who had lived under oppressive regime. Kingsley ensured adequate funding not only for repairs, but also for counselors and support programs. He also supported curricular reforms that McGonagall implemented, including more robust education about the history of the Wizarding Wars so that future generations would understand the dangers of extremism. One of Kingsley's most enduring legacies was the reform of the magical justice system. Before his leadership, trials could be extremely arbitrary. During the panic about Sirius Black, Sirius himself never received a proper trial before being sent to Azkaban. Under Fudge, political enemies were persecuted while connected criminals escaped justice. Kingsley established appropriate procedural protections, including the right to legal representation, more rigorous evidence standards, and an independent review body to prevent abuse. He also reformed Azkaban, removing the Dementors completely and implementing a more humane prison system focused on rehabilitation when possible beyond just punishment. The decision to remove the Dementors from Azkaban was particularly controversial. These creatures had guarded the prison for centuries, but had joined Voldemort during the war, demonstrating that they were loyal only to the nearest source of human misery, not to the government. Kingsley argued that using creatures that literally fed on human happiness and hope as guards was fundamentally inhumane and inconsistent with the values they hoped to rebuild. He was criticized for supposedly making Azkaban too comfortable, but he responded that even convicted criminals maintained basic human dignity and that punishment didn't need to equal torture. During his years as minister, Kingsley also faced remaining threats. Not all Death Eaters were captured immediately after Voldemort's fall. Some fled abroad, others went into deep underground. There were attempts at terrorist attacks by remaining cells of pure-blood extremists who refused to accept the new order. Kingsley had to balance security vigilance with the civil liberties he had worked so hard to establish. It was a delicate balancing act, but he generally succeeded, using targeted intelligence and precise operations instead of mass surveillance or draconian security policies that would punish the innocent. Kingsley's leadership was also tested by economic challenges. The war had devastated the wizarding economy. Businesses had closed, international trade had been interrupted, and many families had lost everything. Kingsley implemented economic recovery programs, including subsidized loans for small businesses, professional training programs for those who needed new skills, and public works to repair damaged infrastructure while creating jobs. His approach was pragmatic instead of ideological, focused on what worked instead of rigidly adhering to any particular economic theory. Through all of this, Kingsley maintained his characteristic humility and accessibility. Even as minister, he didn't develop the kind of arrogance or isolation that had afflicted his predecessors. He continued to listen to common citizens, to visit wizarding communities throughout the country, and to stay connected with the realities that ordinary people faced. His door was always open to Order of the Phoenix members and others who had fought at his side. He never forgot where he came from or who he fundamentally was, a public servant dedicated to his people's welfare. The years under Kingsley's leadership brought a stability and prosperity to the British wizarding world that hadn't been seen in generations. Voldemort's threat was permanently eliminated. Tensions between purebloods, half-bloods and Muggleborns, although not completely resolved, diminished significantly as new policies and education changed attitudes. Magical creatures began to receive more rights and respect. The next generation of wizards and witches grew up in a world more just, safer, and more hopeful than their parents had known. Harry Potter, working as an Auror under Kingsley, and eventually becoming head of the Auror department, often reflected on how lucky the wizarding world had been to have Kingsley Shacklebolt when they needed him most. It wasn't just his magical abilities or his courage. Though these were extraordinary, it was his wisdom, his balanced judgment, his genuine compassion combined with firmness when necessary. It was his ability to see the big picture while still caring about individual details. It was, fundamentally, his essential decency as a person. Kingsley Shacklebolt's story doesn't end with a single great dramatic event, but rather with years of consistent, often unglamorous work of rebuilding a society. He didn't seek personal glory or legacy. He simply did what needed to be done every day, making difficult decisions with integrity, standing up for those without power, and leading by example. In an era of spectacular heroes like Harry Potter who defeated the Dark Lord, Kingsley represents a different but equally essential kind of heroism. The heroism of wise leadership, competent administration, unwavering dedication to public service. When future generations of wizards study the Second Wizarding War and its aftermath, they will read about Harry Potter's courage, Lily Potter's sacrifice, Albus Dumbledore's strategy. But those who truly understand this period will recognize that it was Kingsley Shacklebolt, as much as anyone else, who saved the wizarding world. He saved it not just through battles, though he fought in many, but through the difficult and essential task of transforming military victory into lasting peace, of transforming the end of a tyranny into the beginning of a truly just society. Kingsley Shacklebolt remains to this day one of the most respected and beloved ministers of magic in history. His name is synonymous with integrity, competence, and leadership during the darkest times. His calm, deep voice, which once announced the ministry's fall at a wedding, became the voice that guided an entire society through reconstruction and renewal. His silver hair, the Patronus that brought warnings of danger during the war, became a symbol of hope and resilience. And the man behind these images, the Auror, who became resistance warrior, who became leader of a nation, demonstrated that true greatness comes not from power or ambition, but from character, principles, and unwavering dedication to doing what is right, no matter the cost. This is the story of Kingsley Shacklebolt, a hero whose greatest triumph was not on the battlefield, but in building a better world after the battles ended. And so we come to the end of Kingsley Shacklebolt's extraordinary journey, the silent warrior who became the voice of hope when all seemed lost. From his days as an infiltrated Auror, risking everything to protect Sirius Black, through the dark nights of the Resistance when his silver hair was the only beacon of light amid the darkness, to the years of Reconstruction where his wisdom and integrity shaped a more just wizarding world, Kingsley taught us that heroes aren't just those who fight with wands in hand, but also those who have the courage to lead with compassion, to choose justice over revenge, and to work tirelessly for others. Without seeking personal glory, If you enjoyed this deep story about one of the most underrated characters in the Harry Potter universe, don't forget to leave your like, share with other fans, and especially subscribe to the channel to help us reach that goal of 1,000 subscribers. See you in the next video, where we'll continue exploring the fascinating stories hidden in the pages and between the lines of the magical world. Until then, and remember, sometimes the greatest heroes are those whose stories are told in whispers, not in shouts.